All right. Hey, everybody. Thanks for joining us for week 4 of our Better Conversations book study. This is when it's going to get really good. We've jumped ahead to chapter 8, and we're going to talk about toxic words and emotions, redirecting toxic words and emotions. And it's going to be a great conversation. I just know it because it's such an important piece of us that we all run into as coaches. And if we've got to come up with some great strategies to tackle it. And absolutely, Jim Knight has some great ideas. So we're going to get into it. We have a smaller group today, so we're going to go ahead and let everybody introduce themselves and say hi if they're okay with it. You don't have to talk for long, but if you will just take a second, tell us your name, tell us where you coach, what grade levels you coach, and how long you've been coaching, that'd be awesome. It's kind of alphabetical by first name on here, so we'll start with Becky if you want to introduce yourself. Make sure you unmute.
Hi, I'm Becky McCraw. I'm in Gaffney, South Carolina. I'm in an elementary school and I've been in the same school for the last 13 years. Prior to that, I coached at another school in our district for 5 years. So this is like my 17th, 18th year coaching in various roles. I've coached under several initiatives, federal grants and state grants. And right now I'm a Read to Succeed coach, which is a South Carolina law that says that all our third graders will be reading on grade level by the time they leave third grade. So I've known my faculty for a very long time, and that has its perks and it has its downfall because I think sometimes they're so comfortable with me. But it's good to see all of you, and I'm happy to be here. I couldn't come last week, so I need to go back and watch that the replay of that. So
thanks, Becky. Brianna, I'd love to meet you.
Hi, I'm Brianna. I am a coach in Texas. This is my first year as a coach, and I'm also new to my district as well. So it's been a whole lot of everything new. I think I listened in on last week's. I haven't been able to stay for any of them because this time on Thursdays is really popular. But all the conversations you guys had last week that really made me think, and I've been able to join in on Voxer. I have to actually jump off a little early today for another webinar, but I'm hoping to be able to participate a little bit.
Thanks so much. We're so glad you're here. Yeah, I'm glad you've been able to join us on Voxer. I've been listening to you just this morning. So if anybody else hasn't joined on Voxer or hasn't been able to come and is watching the replay, please feel free to join us over on Voxer. All the directions for how to join Voxer are in the free course, so you should be able to find those pretty easily. Hey, Amy, welcome. We're introducing ourselves. So Jennifer is going to go next.
We're good. I'm Jennifer. I'm from Arizona. I'm actually still technically in the classroom. So I've been teaching third grade for 9 years and going into a coaching role at a different school, but within my same school district. So hopefully it'll be a smooth transition. I'm a little worried with everything going on. And that's me.
Thank you. Jessica, nice to see you. Is your baby with you today?
Yeah, it's his feeding time, so I apologize that I'm kind of multitasking. But I'm Jessica. I'm from Michigan. This is my first year as a K-12 literacy coach. So I'm working within the whole district. It is a district that I taught for 12 years in the high school English classroom. When I was first hired into the job, I was going to be a 6-12 data and literacy coaching, but then staffing shifts happened. So now we're divided K-12 between data coaching and literacy coaching. So that was kind of a big shock at the end of last summer. And I'm working hard to learn all the elementary stuff and be there for all the buildings in the district.
Thanks, Jessica. Christy, I'd love to meet you too.
Yes, I'm Christy Terry. I'm from Jackson County, Georgia, which is kind of between Athens, Georgia, and Atlanta. I'm a K-5 instructional coach. So I support, I guess, about 50 teachers, and our school's about, I guess, like 1,000 students. So kind of support all different subject areas. So this is my second year coaching.
That's great. Lamita? How do I say that?
It's actually Laminda. But I
Mindy?
go by Mindy, so we'll just do away with all of that.
Okay, Mindy.
Hey, I'm from Obion County, Tennessee, which is the northwest corner where Missouri, Arkansas, Tennessee, Kentucky all come together. I'm just completing my first year as a literacy coach in grades 4 through 12, and I'm actually adding grade 3 next year. Our state is in a huge curriculum adoption for ELA, and that has been basically where I've poured in all year long. I don't think that was what was necessarily intended, but that's just what it turned into. So I haven't joined any Voxer conversations yet, but I'm really wanting to get into that. This reading this week has really spoken to me on a couple of areas, and last week's did too. So we're trying to set up a coach and I are trying to set up some times with our supervisors to maybe let them listen to some of the conversations. So anyway, I'm glad to be with y'all.
We're so glad to have you. That sounds great. Yes, this book will definitely provoke lots of thinking and feeling. So we'll get to the discussion. Absolutely. Mary Jane, looks like are you in your classroom today?
I am. Yes, I'm sitting here trying to get away from my crazy children at home. No. Well, there is some truth to that. But anyway, I'm Mary Jane White. I am in Western Kansas. I live about 40 minutes from Colorado, in a really small area, small town. I'm a pre-K through 4 literacy coach in a district with a total of about 700 students in a K-12 district. So it's pretty small. And hey, go Jessica for Michigan. I'm from Michigan. I went to school in Michigan, graduate school, everything. So I tell you, I miss trees. That's all I'm going to say. This is my second year of coaching, and I have many other hats and many other roles as well as coaching that I sort of try to balance out. So.
And Shelly, South Carolina, right?
Hi, I'm Shelly, and I wanted to apologize for my girls who are on a Zoom call with their orchestra and band, and they're playing flute and violin. I tried to close the door. I don't know if you can hear them. But my name's Shelly Shope. I live in Fort Mill, South Carolina, and I serve in the school district of Rock Hill, which is just right down the road. And we are outside of Charlotte. So if that kind of helps you geographically. I am a first-year coach who was hired in October. So I kind of hit the floor going, oh my goodness. I work at a charter school, K-8, and it is extremely small. I only have 3 teachers that I work with, and we have less than 40 students in our school, and we're a charter school for at-risk kiddos who might possibly be working with DSS already, or that might be kind of the community where we're serving community kiddos, but at risk is why you would choose our school. And that's all I have written down. I just am coaching literacy and not anything else other than that. So.
All right. Thank you so much. Amy, since you joined us a little late, you're up next.
Hi, everyone. I'm Amy Rudd. I'm an instructional coach for, my building is now going to be 3 through 6. We're adding another grade every year until we reach 8th grade. The students that I serve at my building are at risk for reading. They got into a lottery by having scores in the 25th percentile and below on the map. So they have a lot of issues with reading, which is good for me because that's my background. I was originally a literacy coach, but now I'm an instructional coach, so I'm more generalized. And let's see what else. I'm just glad to join you guys. I feel like this book has been a really good, right in the nick of time kind of experience for me to be in. And I love the chapter this week because I feel like it's an area where I struggle when people are saying things. I don't know how to respond. I'm just like, and so I feel like I have some strategies now. So thanks.
Yes. That is definitely one thing I love too. I'll introduce myself. I didn't at the beginning. I'm Allison Peterson. I was lonely in quarantine, and I thought to myself, we need to get a group of coaches together and start thinking about something that seems relevant in this crisis. And the Better Conversations book is the book that really just transformed me from like kind of understanding coaching to realizing that what this really could be. And so I think it's just such a powerful book, and I'm excited to be able to host the book study for us just so that we can collaborate and I can connect with you. I know we all feel disconnected in this environment. So I've been out of the classroom. I was a 7th and 8th grade English teacher for 7 years, and then I came out of the classroom. This is my 6th year in a coaching role. I was doing academic technology at my old school, and then I moved into instructional coaching and launched a program at that school, and we really just got it off the ground, and it's super exciting. And then my husband got a new job at a school in Florida. He's a principal, and so we moved to Florida, and I was able to now start an instructional coaching program here at this school, except that just means it's just me. So I hope to grow it, but right now it's just me. And I do love the work, but it's we work in independent Christian schools, and all the schools we've been at have been that. And so they're smaller, and I'm K through 12, so it's about 70 teachers to 1 right now. But, you know, I do the best I can. So let's get the conversation going. I'm going to reshare our little Mentimeter that we had going here. We were talking about how do we react to these types of emotional situations. And I thought it was just like a good little icebreaker for us here to be thinking about. What do you do? Do you hide and avoid? Do you attack and fight? Do you think and talk? So it looks like we have a lot of hiders. We have at least one attacker, and then I'm a thinker and a talker for sure. That really helps me. So I think that this book takes a lot of self-reflection to be thinking about how you respond in these situations. And so to start naming it, like Jim says, naming your emotions, naming how you're feeling, and then naming how you respond to things can also really help. So let me see what we were going to talk about here. We've got, you know, we can talk about this as you're talking if you want to throw in anything there about that. And then let me go over. Let me slide over. All right, let's do this one. What's the hardest thing about controlling your emotions? If you'll try that one. I just put a few potential answers in there. I'm sure you have some others, but put your response in that one. See. You can kind of rank them which way you think. All right, those are starting to come in. Wanting to avoid conflict is a very common one, I'm sure. Keeping away the tears is always a hard one for me too. What are you thinking about those? All right, so that kind of leads us into the first question for our discussion today, and I'd love for you to unmute and share your thoughts, which are, you know, what has worked for you when you were faced with toxic words and emotions? I know, you know, can be something that Jim mentioned, or, but what maybe in the situations that you've faced has worked for you? I have a few things to share, but I'd love to hear from you first. Anybody want to unmute and join with that idea? Anything that's worked for you?
Well, I think that this was perfect for this week because I happen to, it's the end of our school, and so some teachers are coming in to get some paperwork done, and I ran into one, and then I was like going in to say, hi, what can I help with? And she's like, just the person I want to see. I'm like, oh. So my first reaction is, oh no. in my head. But it turned out our district has a new superintendent. This particular person has a lot of control within some political organizations and doesn't like a curriculum. So kind of starts poking at me to say, hey, don't you think we're going to change this? Hey, what do you think? Hey, did the new superintendent take the job? Like just leading me down a path that was not going to be productive. I said, wow, those are great questions. I really don't know the answers. And I really try to hold back and just be neutral in the situation, knowing she was kind of trying to get a little rise out of me. And so it was very helpful to read this at this point and just kind of try to take the neutral ground of not my game right here. This isn't my position to answer these for you.
That's so true. Anyone else have anything that's kind of worked for them when they've been faced with these types of situations?
I think one thing, I'm not saying I'm like that great at it, but it's something I try to keep in mind, is not making the assumption. And that was actually advice I got from the coach I was originally going to be working with. And I had already been hired. I knew I was going to have the coaching job this year. It was an end of the year meeting and everyone was freaking about data and like kind of yelling at her. It felt like yelling at her, getting an attitude. And I talked to her after and I'm like, how do you keep your cool? And she's like, I just remind myself they're not mad at me. They're stressed. They're scared. It has nothing to do with me. And I just got to help them the best way I can. And so that is something I've really tried to keep in my head when working with teachers. And I know they're upset. Like it's not, I'm the one that said keeping the tears away is very hard because I can be very emotional and take things personally, but it's probably not about you. And I think you can kind of move, and then you can become that third person, like having that third person outlook. When you remember it's not about you and you can't make these assumptions. I mean, sometimes it might be, but in, just being aware of what assumptions are you making, and it's not always about you.
I completely agree. I think the sooner we start to realize that their emotions are not actually directed at us, the better we will do with our response. One of the things that I thought a lot about as I did a lot of research about coaching is just that it's really about the brain not wanting to change. Your brain is not really built to change. It's built to keep the status quo, and it likes the status quo, and it wants to keep everything that way because then it doesn't have to work very hard. But when you ask it to change, it is in resistance mode. It is in fight or flight mode. And so if we start to realize that what we're encountering is actually somebody's reaction to change, not necessarily to us. Now, we always want to be mindful of what we've said or what we've done that might have provoked it as well. But most of the time, it's to the change that we are almost representing, since we're helping them grow in all these different ways. So we represent that I have to do it even though I want to fight or flight away. What else has worked for you? Anybody else has something that's worked for them?
When I've had kind of a difficult meeting, and I've even left kind of difficult conversations and then kind of reflected on them and come back to that person and said, the last time we met, something didn't feel right between us. Like, can we talk this through? And just me saying that and just stopping and kind of pausing then allows them to talk and kind of talk it through. And so that's kind of worked for me as well.
Absolutely. That is something that's worked for me too. I was actually going to share with you guys in December, there was the Simply Coaching Summit Reset. And one of the things that I had the opportunity to present was really this topic. And I just pulled back up my presentation and looked back over it today. It was like, well, what would be relevant here? But it was that exact idea of process and circle back. Taking some time to step away from a tough conversation and then thinking about it. I liked this kind of giving yourself a little script to get out of a meeting that seems like it's getting toxic or overly emotional. I liked giving yourself the opportunity to say, thank you for sharing this with me. Let me have some time to think about this and get it back to you. Or the idea of like, of helping them know you're willing to help, but you're not going to solve the problem for them, saying things like, well, let me talk to so-and-so about this and see what I can get some more information. So having some go-to exit lines is something that really has helped me in understanding, like, and also affirming that they have emotions, that they're bringing them to you, and that you are going to affirm their emotions, but you're not necessarily going to engage or give them an answer. And then taking that time to process your emotions first. I love what you were just saying, Christy, about that. And then I think when you do that processing of real emotions, one of the things that happens is the identifying of your real concern. There's this story about the 3 o'clock parade at Disney. I don't know if you've ever heard this, but apparently everyone will come up to the cast members and say, what time does the 3 o'clock parade start? And you're like, what do you mean? What time does the 3 o'clock parade start? But that's the question they're asking you. But what's really happening is they're saying, where can I see it best? Where can I, where do I need to stand? When's it going to come by here? That's what they mean. But they're asking, when does the 3 o'clock parade start? And you think that the obvious answer is, well, 3 o'clock. But since it's a parade, when does it really get here? And so that you kind of have to think about understanding when they come to you with these real emotions, what is the real concern that they're bringing you? And I don't think often in the emotional state, you can actually identify what it is that is the real concern. So I think the process and circle back, like you're talking about, is really key for that. And asking some of these types of questions. Is the emotion in front of you really in response to the issue brought up? Are there other underlying issues that could be core problem? What is the obvious answer that this person is avoiding? Is there anything personal going on that may be causing these emotions to run high? I think these are some things that you can contemplate when you step away. If you can get out of the conversation and step away, I think you can gain a lot from that. And then, like you said, Christy, that's a perfect segue, is circle back, come back around and say, I don't think it felt right, or just want to talk to you about that again. And then, using our questioning skills. And I do, we are going to talk about questioning next week, and that will help us to think about ways we can do that. Also, one of the things that's really helped me, is setting boundaries. And if you've gone into a conversation with them and you've helped them see the change that needs to happen, but every time you come back into the conversation with them, they're still what I call swirling. It means they're still talking about the same thing. They're still overly emotional. It's still not able to get there with it. Trying to say, let's do this. And if they're not coming around, then realizing that you have permission to step away and circle back again later with them. So, I put down there, you're not responsible for someone else's change. So just be thinking about some of those ideas, is trying to set boundaries. And I just want to bring that up, so that I already had it from this other presentation that I did. So I thought it was really valuable. And I just want to share this one other thing with you while we're on it, is the other thing that has really helped me, and it's not really exactly something that Jim outlines, is the idea of finding the runners. And in Ron Clark's book, Move Your Bus, he talks about these different kind of levels of people in your organization. And he talks about going to find the runners. So I think sometimes when we get bogged down with overly emotional people who don't seem to be making progress, if you can go and spend time with somebody, a teacher who is making progress, who is wanting to work with you, who is ready to do the work, who is not overly emotional, you get re-energized by that, and basically can have the opportunity to come back into the coaching relationship with the teacher who is harder to engage with a little bit more energy. And also, he does talk about how it's the runners who move the bus. So if you want to actually make change happen, then focusing on the runners are going to help you too. So it's not exactly the same thing as emotional, but often you find your riders and your walkers being the ones who are overly emotional because they're resisting the change. So absolutely, I think somebody said, can I share the slides? I'm happy to do that. This is, I also have from this presentation from December. So as you're thinking about that, those are just some of the things that's helped me. Did anybody else have anything that's helped them that they want to share? And then we can kind of switch back over to our next question. So let's talk about the chapter. What made you reflect or want to change something about your coaching? Is there anything that you specifically saw in the chapter that you thought was really triggering?
I thought it was interesting where it talks about sometimes not saying something can cause a problem, and I'm probably notorious for that, because I do avoid confrontation, but sometimes by not saying something we create another problem, and sometimes the conversation has to happen. And so that was something that stood out to me, that it said our toxic emotions can negatively affect us in many ways. They can keep us from saying something that should be said.
Yeah, that's a great one. Anybody else have a specific part?
This is kind of towards the end of the chapter, but I really appreciated the tactics for when you're in that toxic conversation: the interrupt, the name, the correct, and the divert. I feel like I've been in a lot of conversations where he talked about the level 1 toxicity, where you'd probably get fired if someone heard you say this. And it's where I live, it's often under the wire, almost like somebody says something that they just assume everyone in the room agrees with, but they don't really name what they're talking about. And it's hard to know what to do in that situation. And being silent is an option, but also I loved the naming part and the example on page 174. Actually, it was on when she says, "Are you really meaning to say?" and then says whatever the speaker is meaning to say. And he says that they'll usually, when a toxic statement is surfaced, the speaker goes back on what he said. Oh, it's on page 173. "You don't really think that men should get paid more for doing the same job as a woman, do you?" And I think that that would be something very difficult for me personally. If everyone in the room seems to know what is being said, but no one's naming it, for me to name it, that would be very difficult. But I think it would be really valuable to bring it up and say, this is what we need to tackle. This is what's being said without being said right now. And I loved the tactic that he gave us for that.
Absolutely. I think there's so many good nuggets in here that were really great. It was a lot about your own emotions too. And I think that that's such a hard thing, because you're trying to think about, well, what should the coachee do? Because they're emotional and they're coming at me. But a lot of this work is such self-reflective work of understanding who you are in this space when you're walking into it, and that you have to hold yourself in a unique way as a coach to not engage in this conversation that way. So I think that the self-reflective pieces are very powerful, and they're the things that have taken me down rabbit holes into thinking a lot more about myself. And I think we talked about last week the Enneagram, and when I was in my old school, we did the Berkman assessment, and that these types of personality assessments help you think a lot about yourself and your motivations and why you're reacting the way you're reacting. And I think that is something that really has to be a part of us growing as coaches, is that self reflection.
Just to piggyback on that, I love the part where they talked about watching the media from your opposite perspective. If you believe in this way, go watch and feel how your body reacts. Feel if your stomach hurts, or you get hot, or you start to get flushed, and really recognizing when we are triggered and we're emotional. I love bringing the body into it, and it was just it was a really neat perspective to recognize when we start to get emotional.
I think the same thing about fight or flight, and like, do you hide? I think when that kind of stuff comes on TV, for me, and I just don't want to engage in it, I just try and get out of the room and leave, right? So like, how do you respond in terms of like wanting to get out of it, or do you want to fight, or do you want to talk it out with somebody? You know, what are your ways that you respond? So that's so true. Other things that really made you want to be reflective as a coach when you were reading?
I think one of the quotes under the toxic conversations part, if I engage in these types of conversations, can anyone really trust me? I found that very interesting, because you don't want to be a part of the conversations, but there are times that you get sucked in. And so it's something to really remember. I don't want to be a part of that, and I want these people to trust me, and I don't want to lose their trust.
I underlined that area in the book too, on page 169, the importance of trust, because if trust crumbles, it's so hard to get back. So, like, I think preserving trust at all costs is really super important. And one of the things that I tend to do, like, I do not eat lunch in the teacher's lounge, because a lot of times that's where toxic conversations happen, because people are venting or whatever. And so like I don't eat in there on purpose. But I will go in like at the start of lunch and like check in with everybody. Hello, oh, how you doing? Like, you know, just like little mini conversations or whatever. But I don't stay the whole time. I just make an appearance and do a little bit of connecting, but then I leave.
I think that's actually a really great practical thing, because I've had the same issue where I am like trying to not go to lunch, but then also really want to build relationships, and that opportunity to do that during lunch.
I think for me, like an overall general, I really struggled even reading on to the end of the chapter, because I was really focusing on the front. There was lots to think about, because as I was reflecting, I was thinking, probably, 80% of this is my attitude and what I bring to the table, and where I'm at, whether it's stuff at home, whether I'm tired or not feeling well, or my kids are sick, or, the extent of things, or, someone added more to your workload at work. And then something, you're walking into a situation that, and what are my buttons? What are my personal buttons at work, at home, and what makes me react the way I do? So I think a lot of the power and control is within us to control ourselves and our thoughts and our emotions. And then we're thinking more clearly to do the strategies that we know work.
Absolutely. Well, we can be thinking about, if you have any other thoughts as you answer this next question, you can always jump them in. But what do you think is most useful in all of this with coaching teachers during this time of crisis and high emotions? I know that some of these answers might overlap, but I think just kind of thinking about them in the perspective of now, with the emotions that we have everyone facing and what they will be faced with when we return, what kind of things do we need to really be thinking about and be mindful of as we prepare for that? I think that's kind of what we can be thinking about with this, is just how do we use this in this time meaningfully, to help and support our teachers.
I think it's definitely not the time to change anything that doesn't need to be, because we have so much that's uncertain and so much that's up in the air of how we're going to start the year, what it's going to look like, and so many questions that everybody has, that be really careful about even simple changes, like don't move first grade lunch or something. I mean, I know that sounds crazy, but just simple changes are enough to be a little much right now.
I think keeping in mind some of the questions, I know it was more for like your own emotions, but even trying to think of like the 5 whys when if you might be dealing with someone that seems very emotional or charged up, or it might seem like it's going in a toxic way, like stop and think why, because again, we have so many things out of our control right now, and everyone does. And, responsibilities at home and everything else, and worrying about what it's going to look like, that maybe just trying to keep in perspective where that you don't know the whole story of what's going on, and maybe you can't necessarily answer them, or even if you go into something upset, stopping and ask why, and maybe get to, okay, I'm kind of stressed, like I came in today, like I've been having kind of a really rough day, like, as I was reading this chapter, it kind of like worked out, but just to recognize that and be aware. And I kind of took a step back from the situation for a second before that, so just because I was aware of like how I was feeling. So just trying to see the bigger picture and all that rambling. That's what I was trying to get at, is be aware that there's a lot of whys we may not even be aware of, even for ourselves, but definitely for others.
I had one other point I wanted to make, going back to the second question. On page 171, when it says to stop toxic conversations before they even get started, I was thinking about the importance of norms. And when I was I think it was my first or second year as a coach, I don't remember, but I was leading a PD and there were no norms in place. I just walked in and started the presentation. And one of the things that is a problem besides this is having the administrator be at your professional development session to be your champion. Anyways, the administrator walked out of the meeting and there were no norms, and one of the teachers just started cussing. And I was like, gosh. And then I was talking with another coach afterward, and I was like, I will never start another session without norms in place, ever. And so ever since that time, I always make sure that I have norms, just a habit every time now.
Amy, can I just ask you to talk a little bit more about starting a meeting with having norms?
Yeah.
About maybe what that looks like, or maybe how you do that.
Sure. So like one of my slides at the beginning will be, we will start on time. We will be respectful of each other and our thinking. What else? Come prepared. Like, making sure that if you have an article or a book or something like that you've read in advance, like you're coming prepared with having read it or whatever. And then my last one that I always end with is, are you okay with these? Is there anything else you'd like to add? Just to open it up to them, because I think when you get input from your group, like that always creates buy-in as well. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you so much for explaining that. That was helpful.
Yeah.
And just to piggyback off of that, that's how I start, like the beginning of every year. That's my first meeting with my teams. Like we set norms as a team. So all of my grade level norms could look different for each grade level. And they choose, like they usually have a list of like maybe 5 norms that they choose that they agree to. And then we go over the norms before every meeting.
And I was also participating in another webinar right before I came into this one. It was on STEM learning, and they had 5 things that they called them STEMmy norms. A promise to get better, confront reality, clarify expectations, create transparency, and deliver results. So there's another set of norms for looking at progress if you're looking for results.
Those are so great. Is there any chance you could write those down?
Yeah, do you want me to type them into the chat?
Okay.
Yeah, into the
Okay.
chat. That
I
would be
will.
great. If you'll type yours too, Amy, the ones that you said you use.
Okay.
I do think norms are really powerful. One of the things that made me think of while we were talking is just kind of going back to this idea of like, well, how do we help them during this crisis with emotions? Is I think when we do have opportunities to lead professional development, we want to like save some space for asking them how they're feeling, like giving them time. Maybe it's something as simple as a little entrance ticket where they write down how they're feeling. Maybe they get 3 minutes to talk to their table, to talk about, like, how are you actually feeling right now? I think if we're too focused on the business of instruction or learning a new strategy or whatever it is, and we're not thinking enough about their emotional state and the emotional state that they come to us with, especially like just as a way to kind of clear the air before you start a meeting too, is to give them that time to kind of shake off anything that they maybe have brought with them as baggage. It's always hard for an after school meeting. They've had an entire day with students and they probably had quite a few moments of overwhelm. And now here they are and they have to focus and learn. And they, it's like allowing that buffer time but being intentional and saying like, I know it could be emotional right now, so let's take a few minutes. I actually have been thinking about like, okay, well, this has been so great. How can we keep doing this? Our little chats here. So we'll, of course, keep working through this book. But one of the books that is really powerful in that is called Dare to Lead by Brene Brown. And you probably have read something by Brene Brown, but I don't know if you've read her most recent one because it's about leadership and it's Dare to Lead. But anyway, she talks about like doing a lot of that, holding the space for emotions in these types of things. And one of the things she talks about is like a rumble, which is like having these really intense conversations and realizing you have to walk into them. And if you don't, you won't really get through to the other side. So that's a really powerful book that really complements a lot of the things we've been talking about here. I always have a new book to share, I guess. All right. So Chrissy, did you have something?
I was wondering if you guys have been listening to her new podcast called Unlocking Us, Brene Brown. It's been really good.
But I haven't
really
tried it.
good.
It's good.
If you just, it comes out new on Wednesdays. How it got started is like in response to the COVID-19 and like all the things that we're dealing with in the moment with all these things are happening. And I just felt like she's talking to me. Like she grabbed my shoulders and she's having a conversation with me. So definitely a good thing to listen to.
Awesome. I will add that link to our show notes here so that people can grab that if they want to. I would definitely want to listen. Other ways that this is going to help us in the midst of crisis that might be on your mind. Anything?
One of the things that I just feel personally I really need to take from this chapter is to be quick to hear and slow to speak. I feel like part of just every time I'm in a situation where someone has a problem, that I feel I must solve it. I must swoop in and I must be the answer for their problem. And that I just need to zip it. Unless it's those times when we need to name it and call it out, that a lot of it is just me learning how to be slow to speak and quick to hear. So that's been a really big takeaway for me.
So true, so true. And I love that he actually quotes the Bible verse there. But if you go into James and you keep reading, he talks about how the tongue has just this overwhelming power, like we have to realize how much power our tongues have. And James talks a lot about it in that, in his letter in 2 different places, he talks about the power of the tongue. And if we can find a way to hold our tongue and give more space for people to do their own thinking, then we can really let them do the thinking and let us be the listeners. And I think it's very powerful. We were talking on the Voxer. I thought this was great about this idea of like when you're asking people questions, does it feel authentic or do they kind of know you're coaching them? And I think the difference, my personal experience with this is that the difference here is not this necessarily that they know you're coaching them because you're using coaching moves and coaching questions. It's that they feel different when they come to see you. If they go to a colleague or an administrator, they're going to get somebody who comes to them and says, the teacher presents a problem and the administrator or the colleague just gives an answer, a solution. But when they come to see you, they get something different. They get prompted. They get asked to think a little further. They do get brainstorming with you, and they actually leave with like a different feeling. Like it felt different to sit across from you. And it's not because necessarily doing it better. It's just you are invoking those coaching moves, and it actually will come out in how the person who's sitting across from you feels when they leave. And then hopefully they want to come feel that way again. And I've had a teacher sit across from me this year and go, why does it feel different when I work with you? And I'm like, I don't know. And she's like, you're magical. I'm like, I promise you I'm not. It has nothing to do with me. You're doing all the thinking. But that's the difference, is that when she's sitting with me, she's doing the thinking. And when she goes to somebody else, they're doing the thinking for her. And I think there's that saying, I can't remember who said it, but it's that idea of like, you are how you make people feel, right? So that's how people remember you. I'm sure you know who said that, and I just don't remember. But that's what lingers with them. And so I think that coaching has the ability to do that, and help people, think for themselves. So I think I've gone off on a tangent as we usually do, but I want to open the floor for what's on your mind that you want to talk about.
Before we leave this, I wanted to mention something that someone talked about in Voxer about the idea of going to the balcony.
Yeah.
That whole idea of distancing yourself. And I have trouble going to the balcony. I'm like, I guess I get caught up in other people's emotions, or I know my faculty so well, and we have so much history that I have trouble doing this. And I think that's a really good strategy of distancing yourself from it and seeing it from both perspectives. So I really like that idea of going to the balcony. So what?
Amy, did you want to add thoughts on that?
Yeah, that was the one that I was like, oh, that's such a good idea. I need to do that. Because I feel like I get caught up in the moment very easily, and just taking time to detach myself and look at it from a different perspective, I think is really key. So I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna try that strategy. That's when I was like, yeah, I think I need to do that.
I think that you have to give yourself permission to do that, because I think we think that we need to engage in their emotions, and we need to support them. We need to kind of get in there with them. And it's not that we're not. We want to really believe in who they are and that they're capable of coming through these things. And by going to the balcony intentionally in your mind and realizing that, kind of like Jessica was saying, this is not actually about me. This is about them resisting change and understanding why they're doing the things they're doing. Jessica, I love some of the things you brought about that. And then just stepping back and saying, okay, they are just venting right now. I'm going to listen. And I think, too, going back to having those exit lines so you can get out of the conversation so that you can continue to say, okay, all right, I'm listening to what you're saying. Let me follow up with you and see what I can do. Those are some ways that you can try and stay on that balcony. That hit me so hard. I actually read it in Jim's other book, his first one called Instructional Coaching. It's in that book in the very last chapter, which was the book that like changed me for me. And it's called it's like called Being a Change Agent, or something about like being ambitious for change. That whole chapter is about that. And he talks about the balcony there. And I had that aha moment, and it's been helpful. And it's helpful to, if you do work with other coaches, to coach them in that. If they come to you and they're swirling as coaches about a situation that they've just gone to with a teacher, trying to help remind them to step back and get on the balcony and watch from above, and what do you need to take into account. So I love the balcony. It's absolutely one of the most powerful things I've seen. Absolutely. Other things that are just on your mind that you want to talk about? We're close to out of time. It's flown by today. Okay. If you have something, feel free to interrupt. One of the things I was going to ask you is, do you really want next week to be our last week together, or do you want to do more? Oh, awesome. I see lots of nodding heads. So I guess what I wanted to get your feedback on is, where do you want to go from here? We had initially planned to kind of go back to chapter 4 and talk about dialogue. And then chapter 5 is questioning. So we can stick with that. I don't know if you feel like you still want to do 2 chapters in a week. I don't know if that's too much. So first of all, give me feedback on that. And you want to just go back to chapter 4 and start going back through each chapter? Do you want to jump around, go to a specific one you think that'd be valuable? So I'd love to hear your thoughts, and I'll kind of adjust our design here for our time together, because it's been so great. I thought, 5 weeks will be a long time, but so far I've just loved having this time with y'all. So think about it for a minute.
This is not about what we should do next. This is just a little plug for the Audible version of this book, because when I think I was a little late to the game about finding out about this meeting. And so Amazon was going to take like a week for me to get the actual book, but I could get the Audible version that day. And just for anyone, sometimes it's really hard to listen to texts like this, because you feel like you want to take notes. And I think that the Audible version has been excellent for me. Just if I'm walking or I'm in the car, it's been one of those easy reads. It's definitely something. I did order the book so that it could come to me, so that I could actually have the outlines. And there's a lot of diagrams in the book that are really, really helpful. But the meat is, you can get it in the Audible version. So I'm just putting a plug out there for people who are having a hard time sitting down with quiet with their, homeschooling their kids and all of that. This has been really nice to have the Audible version as well. So
I have to second that. The thing that surprised me about the Audible is that I'm hearing things that I don't remember having read, even when I'll like read it. I think what I'm doing is I'm skimming when he has like chunks of quotes sometimes, and they read it to you. Anyway, it's good. I agree. If you're an Audible person. Any feedback about moving forward, what you think we should do? If not, I'll just pick her out and we'll start going forward. But definitely tell me if you think reading 2 chapters is too much for next week, because right now we have it down for chapters 4 and 5.
I think dialogue is so important that perhaps maybe we should just do 1 chapter so we can really dive into that aspect of it.
I agree.
I agree with that as well. And next week, I have to work next week because we're closing out our schools. And so 2 chapters might be a little bit much for right now. And I don't know, we've been working from home, but we have to go in and work next week. So that would be great if you could just do 1 chapter.
Okay, that sounds like a consensus. Let's go back to chapter 4 next week then, and we'll talk about dialogue and what he says about dialogue. And then the next week we will do 5. So if you want to read ahead, feel free. But if you just want to focus on one chapter for next week, fostering dialogue, I think, these could really go in any order. So I don't think it really matters the order, but because there's so much interconnectivity in them, we'll probably see pieces from each one again. So good things. All right. Well, what I'll do is I'll put the recording into the course. I will link in some of the things that we mentioned. And there's also a couple of things in the Voxer that were mentioned, some note taking. We talked in the Voxer about whether or not to take notes while you're coaching. So that was an interesting conversation. So I don't know if you haven't joined the Voxer, if you can go in and listen to those. You might not be able to, but if you are already in it, you should see those in there. And we had some note taking resources. So I'll link all of those in the course. I'll send some reminder emails for next week and see you on the Voxer. Until then, friends, thanks so much. Love seeing your smiling faces. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.
You're so
Have a good
welcome.
week.
Thank you.